The horizon blurred as I watched Gwen board a plane with James, not just leaving me, but our vows behind. Our tropical escape, once a haven, became the stage for deceit as she fell into their trap. Her return, a storm of confessions and regrets, left us grappling with the pieces. How do you rebuild from betrayal? Dive into our tale of love, deception, and a quest for forgiveness. This is my story. Enjoy watching it.
My name is Gary Price, and I was married to Gwen, the love of my life. We married right after college because Gwen was pregnant, and we loved each other deeply. I graduated with a degree in computer science and business, and Gwen studied arts and entertainment with a minor in finance. I have a very good memory and high emotional intelligence. Gwen was a bit scatterbrained but very passionate. Our first child was William, and soon after came Sarah. Gwen then became a full-time mom, and I worked for the government as a systems analyst. I did well at my job and got promoted, but I couldn't share details about my work with Gwen. Our relationship was strong, and Gwen was very adventurous. When the kids started school, she wanted to work to help with our finances. I agreed, even though we were struggling with our bills, and Gwen always wanted more, like a bigger house with a pool. She got a job as an assistant accountant. The money was good, and I was happy about the extra income. However, her first paycheck went towards a new car, and she put her salary in her personal account. When I asked her about it, we had a big argument. I decided to separate our finances by closing our joint accounts and keeping my income to myself. That evening, Gwen found out her cards were declined, which led to another huge argument. Things settled down after a few weeks, but our relationship felt strained. One night, I told Gwen we needed to talk about our spending, especially her new car. She was worried I wanted a divorce, but I assured her I loved her and only wanted us to manage our money better. She agreed to try harder. Gwen promised to cover her car expenses and managed well. Meanwhile, I was filling in for my manager who was ill, and eventually I was offered his position permanently, which came with a nice salary boost and a bonus. Our financial situation was much better now, so we planned a vacation to celebrate. We chose the Cayman Islands for a 2-week getaway. The night before leaving, we stayed at Gwen's parents' house. The next day, her dad drove us to the airport. Our hotel room was small, but it didn't matter because we planned to spend most of our time outdoors. We had a romantic dinner and a wonderful evening. The next day, while I worked on a report, Gwen went to sunbathe. I joined her later and saw an older man applying tanning oil on her back while his wife sat nearby. I felt a twinge of jealousy, but reminded myself there was no real reason to worry. Later, Gwen explained they were just a friendly couple, James and Mary, on vacation like us. After lunch, Gwen returned to the pool, and I went back to my report. I took another break and glanced down at the pool where Gwen was chatting with the couple again. Deciding to join them, I walked over. Gwen greeted me with a wave and introduced me. She mentioned that Mary had invited her shopping after lunch and was off to change. Mary left to drop off her purchases, leaving James and me alone. James shared that he was French but raised in England, so he didn't have much of an accent. Our conversation drifted to various topics until James remarked how women could spend all day shopping without buying anything, which made us laugh. However, he then claimed that women are superficial and can be swayed easily with small gifts, adding that they are untrustworthy. I disagreed, defending Gwen's trustworthiness. James chuckled and boasted he could win her over in a week if he tried. I confidently told him that wouldn't happen as I trusted Gwen completely. He laughed, calling me naive and claiming that all women, especially American ones, are high maintenance and that men in other cultures keep their women under control. Before I could respond, James excused himself. Concerned about Gwen associating with someone holding such views, I decided to warn her to keep her distance from them. Back in our room, I finished my report. After calling Gwen and not reaching her, I texted her. She replied hours later, excited about her shopping trip and mentioning a gift from James. I waited in the room until she arrived at 7:30 p.m. with several shopping bags. I asked where she had been, mentioning our late dinner plans. Gwen nonchalantly mentioned she had already eaten. Frustrated, I expressed my disappointment. She apologized, distracted by the shopping spree, and suggested I grab dinner while she showered. When she showed me her purchases, I was stunned. She modeled an extremely revealing outfit. I asked why she bought such a thing, and she replied it was Mary and another friend, Jane's, suggestion. They had even helped her pick it out. She then showed me another daring outfit complete with accessories. I wasn't pleased, reminding her it wasn't just about her. However, she also had a gift for me, a deep-sea fishing trip ticket, knowing how much I loved fishing. Grateful yet still upset, our evening took another turn when Gwen mentioned going out with James and Mary again. I firmly declined, wanting time alone with my wife. She resisted, but I insisted, proposing we spend the evening dancing just the two of us downstairs. She agreed, albeit reluctantly. As the night progressed, she began to enjoy the evening. The next morning I headed out fishing, catching a few marlin but nothing noteworthy. During lunch, Gwen called, spending time with James and Mary again. Frustrated, I expressed my discomfort with her constant company with them. Gwen resisted, asserting her independence. We ended the call unresolved. Returning from fishing, the room was empty again. After unsuccessful attempts to reach Gwen, I finally received a message at 8:00 p.m., a photo of her ready to head to the club with James and Mary. I wasn't invited to the club because I had already said I wasn't going. Gwen told me not to wait up for her as she might not return that night. Concerned, I asked the hotel reception for directions to the club and caught a taxi there. Upon arrival, I saw a long line and tried to get in, but the bouncers threw me out. Brushing off the dirt, I looked up and thought I saw Gwen on the club's roof. Unsure, I tried calling and messaging her all night, but eventually fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I immediately tried calling again, but only reached her voicemail. Worried, I left a voicemail and sent a text. After getting no response by lunchtime, I noticed Gwen's clothes missing from her closet and some empty drawers. Her suitcase was also gone. Confused and upset, I got a message from Gwen explaining she didn't let me into the club because it would have ruined her night, and that she was now island hopping with James for a few weeks. She asked me not to find her. James sent a follow-up message bragging about taking Gwen away and claiming he could easily manipulate her. He attached a video that confirmed his claims. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, I simply replied to Gwen's message with, "No, we won't." I turned off my phone, unable to cope. Devastated, I cried myself to sleep, realizing my marriage was over. The next day, I faced the harsh reality that it wasn't just a bad dream. I called Gwen's parents to meet me at the airport. At the airport, Gwen's dad, Ted, looked for her, and when he asked where she was, I said she wasn't coming back. Confused, he asked if she was okay, and I told him we'd talk in the car. Once in the car, I explained that Gwen had left with another man. Ted didn't believe me until we got home, where I showed him the texts and video. Ted and his wife, Amy, were shocked. Amy left the room in tears, and Ted looked devastated. He apologized for Gwen's actions and offered to look after the kids while I sorted things out. The next day, I visited a lawyer to discuss a divorce due to Gwen's infidelity, though she would likely still get half our assets and alimony. I instructed the lawyer to prepare the divorce papers. Then I met with a director at work who, after hearing my story, said I needed to see a psychologist due to the significant emotional impact. I had previously met the psychologist Amanda during my initial NSA evaluation. Returning to a now empty and cold house that didn't feel like home, I wondered when I would see Gwen again. Despite knowing better, I tried calling her, but her number was no longer active. I checked on the kids through her parents, who said they were doing fine but also couldn't reach Gwen. I reported Gwen missing to the police and showed them the video. They told me she had left willingly and there was nothing they could do. Feeling helpless, I focused on what I could control. I had already secured my finances and consulted with a lawyer. The only thing left was to wait for Gwen's return. Meanwhile, I started counseling sessions with Amanda, where I often ended up crying. Amanda was kind and professional, suggesting we regularly talk about my experience to ease the pain over time. During one session, Amanda asked why Gwen might have left. I guessed it was James's wealth that had lured her away. Amanda agreed it was possible and asked if anything else was troubling me. I shared that I kept having nightmares about being thrown out by bouncers, feeling powerless. Amanda explained this feeling was due to my helplessness at that moment. She advised not returning to work yet and continuing counseling to address my PTSD. Afterward, I met with my director, who was understanding. Based on Amanda's recommendations, I was put on leave pending a medical review, and I was to attend counseling 3 times a week. Additionally, I was offered a self-defense course with the Marines, which I accepted eagerly to boost both my physical and mental strength. The classes were set to start the following week. On the first day, I met Amanda again, and despite being emotional, she reassured me that my feelings were normal at this stage. Unable to bear the pitying looks at the cafeteria, I ate lunch at a local grocery store. Then I went to Quantico for my first training session with a Marine sergeant named Mike Sanders, who made it clear I had my work cut out for me. The training was tough. It included strength exercises, running, swimming, and daily exercises of 50 push-ups, 50 squats, and running 2 miles. That night I slept soundly for the first time in ages. The next morning I was sore all over but pushed myself to run 2 miles. Exhausted, I had to rest in the park but managed to finish the run. Back home, I soaked in a hot bath, determined to improve. At the next counseling session, Amanda laughed when I told her about my training pains, but she was pleased with my progress. After 2 months, I could discuss the difficult events without breaking down, and I started enjoying my workouts and the discipline they brought. I had transformed physically too, losing my belly and gaining muscle. I even updated my look with more stylish clothes and a new haircut. 3 months in, Amanda cleared me to return to work but recommended we still meet weekly. I was a bit disappointed because I had grown fond of her and hoped to pursue a relationship once counseling ended. She said that would be inappropriate for now but didn't rule it out for the future. As for Gwen, there was no word from her, and I realized I no longer missed her. My lawyer advised against divorce for now, suggesting waiting a year to file for desertion. I followed this advice. When counseling ended, Amanda invited me to lunch, which thrilled me. Back at work, I realized I needed help with the kids, so I hired a part-time nanny. I settled into a routine of taking the kids to my place on Saturdays and visiting Gwen's parents for Sunday dinner. It was clear that the mother's absence was impacting the children as their grades started to drop. I spoke to the school principal, who suggested counseling for them, which was arranged to take place at school twice a week after classes. Meanwhile, Amanda and I had started going out on dates. We had only ever kissed goodnight because I was cautious about moving too fast. I was falling for her, but wasn't sure if she felt the same way. Then one evening, she invited me to stay over at her place. There was no rush since Ted and Amy had taken the kids for the night. When I got to Amanda's, her apartment was spotless. I was looking at her CDs when she brought in hot chocolate. We sat down with our drinks. "Harry, we've been seeing each other for a while now, and you've never tried to get closer. Are you still upset about your wife leaving, or don't you find me attractive?" she asked. I told her that I was hurt by what happened with Gwen and the children, but I certainly found her very beautiful. I just didn't want her to think she was just a rebound. "So, when are you going to take me to bed, or do I have to beg?" she teased. I walked over, lifted her up, and carried her to the bedroom. We shared a passionate kiss and spent a while just kissing like teenagers. Eventually, we made love, took a shower together, and fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon pancakes, Amanda's specialty. She served breakfast with a shy smile. We chatted about everything but the night before. She mentioned that if I stayed over again, we'd need more groceries. I explained that I usually had lunch at Gwen's parents' house on Sundays, so I'd have to leave early the next day. We spent the day together, had lunch out, and decided to skip cooking and go out for lobster and salad instead. That evening, we went dancing and later made love slowly and passionately. I realized I was truly falling in love with her and told her so. She felt the same, but suggested we take things slow. The next morning, I left early for Gwen's parents. I decided to tell them I was in a serious relationship now. After the kids went off to play, I shared the news about Amanda. Instead of disappointment, they were happy for me and invited Amanda to lunch the next Sunday. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I called Amanda to tell her about the invitation. She was pleased and wanted to meet the kids first. We planned for her to spend the next weekend at my place. The following Monday at work, my secretary rushed me to see the principal, George Price, where an FBI agent was waiting. He wasn't there to accuse me of anything, but wanted to discuss Gwen's disappearance. He explained that they had seen the video and knew she left willingly. He shared that this pattern of disappearance was not unique, but there was little they could do as it was out of their jurisdiction. He wanted to know if I had any new information. I told him I had shared everything I knew. After he left, George checked in on me, and I ended up telling him about Amanda and our relationship. When I got home, I picked up Amanda to introduce her to the kids. As we arrived, the kids ran to greet us. Sarah asked if Amanda would be their new mother. Amanda looked at me, waiting for my response. "I hope so," I answered, smiling at her. Amanda then suggested the kids show her their rooms. They walked into the house together. Maria greeted us warmly and gave a thumbs up. "Mr. Penders, since you mentioned bringing a guest, I've prepared something special for dinner. Fried chicken with sides will be ready in 15 minutes. I told my husband I'd be home late after cleaning up." I thanked Maria for her hard work and insisted she join us for dinner. As I set the table, Amanda and the kids returned, excited about how tidy their rooms were. I glanced at Maria, who looked away, clearly the one who had tidied up. The five of us sat down and enjoyed the meal, and Amanda helped clear the table, earning a smile from Maria. After Maria left, Amanda played with the children until their bedtime. Surprisingly, they asked her to tuck them in and read a bedtime story, a job usually reserved for me. Everything was going better than expected. When Amanda came back downstairs, I was making coffee and remarked on how well everything had gone. "Your children are so lovely and are handling things so well," she said, impressed. "It looks like counseling is really helping them. Great job." She kissed my cheek and we hugged, then sat in silence for a few moments. "Harry, were you serious about wanting me to be their mom?" she asked. "Yes, but only if you're sure. The pay isn't great, but there are perks. What do you think? Is this too sudden?" "No, it's not too fast for me," she replied with a smile, and we shared a passionate kiss. We decided not to take our relationship further that night, thinking of the kids' feelings. The next day, I told the children that Amanda had agreed to be their new mom, explaining she wouldn't move in immediately. We then spent a fun day at the mall, enjoyed milkshakes, and Amanda answered all their curious questions. We ended up picking out a diamond ring, much to Sarah's delight, while William was less interested. Lunch was at Pizza Hut, followed by shopping for new shoes and clothes for the kids. That evening, Amanda cooked garlic bread lasagna for dinner, which everyone loved. After dinner, she read another story to the kids, and we ended the evening with a glass of wine, just the two of us. I explained to Amanda why I kept photos of Gwen around. I didn't want to erase their mother from the children's lives. Amanda thought it was a thoughtful gesture. The next morning, Amanda made breakfast while the kids watched TV. I hugged her from behind, and she joked about the consequences if the kids weren't around. She seemed a bit anxious about meeting my in-laws later that morning, worried about being seen as replacing their daughter. At breakfast, I reassured her that everything would be fine. We then drove to meet my in-laws, Ted and Amy, who welcomed us warmly. Amy quickly took to Amanda, expressing that as long as Amanda treated me well, there would be no issues. Amanda was moved to tears by their acceptance. The visit ended well, and we returned home tired but happy. For the children's comfort, Amanda and I slept in separate rooms again. Our routine settled into a pleasant rhythm of workdays and weekends filled with family activities. After a year, I finalized my divorce from Gwen due to her abandonment and gained full custody of the children. Amanda and I planned our wedding for the following spring, with Amy and Amanda eagerly handling the preparations. Ted advised me to just let them manage everything. My parents passed away when I was young, and I was raised by an aunt who also died soon after I married Gwen. I didn't have many relatives to invite to my second wedding, just a few friends. Amanda had an older sister she hadn't talked to in 10 years, and she didn't respond to our invitation, so she likely wasn't coming. We invited many of the same people who attended my first wedding with Gwen because Amy and Ted, who we now considered family, insisted on it. Ted was moved to tears when Amanda asked him to walk her down the aisle, and Amy cried when asked to be a witness. I chose William to be my best man, and Ted explained his duties to him. Sarah was a bridesmaid and helped choose her dress. On the big day, Ted walked Amanda down the aisle, and there wasn't a dry eye in the church. The reception was beautiful but small, with only 25 guests, which kept it affordable. We spent our honeymoon in the Bahamas, enjoying 14 days of sunshine, the beach, and time together. We came back ready to start our married life, putting any bad memories of Gwen behind us. 6 months later, Amanda had big news. "Honey, we need to talk," she said, looking worried. I braced myself for bad news. "What's wrong? Aren't we happy?" I asked. Amanda ran into my arms. "Oh, I didn't mean to scare you. Everything's fine and I love you so much. It's just that I'm pregnant with twins. We need a bigger house," she explained. Relieved, I kissed her joyfully. We started house hunting immediately. With our savings and some of the value from our current home, we could afford a nice 5-bedroom house with a granny annex and a swimming pool, not too far from where we lived. The house we found had a rough history. It was previously owned by a criminal and had been searched by the FBI, but it was just what we needed. We moved in 2 weeks before Amanda gave birth to twins, Jason Edward Price and Wendy Amelia Price, named after Gwen's parents, who were thrilled. Amanda decided to be a stay-at-home mom until the kids started school, and we arranged for Maria to help out. Everything was going well, or so I thought, until one day I got a call to come to the director's office immediately. Inside, I was greeted by a man in an FBI suit named Special Agent Frank Grimes. "We need to talk, Harry. May I call you Harry?" he started. "Sure, if I can call you Frank." "Is it okay that this conversation is being recorded?" I asked. "Absolutely. Just so you know you're not in trouble. This is just for our records." "Could you recap everything up to the last message from your wife?" Frank asked. I shared everything, and Frank showed me a photo of Gwen, looking older and tired but recognizable. "Yes, that's her," I confirmed. "She's safe now, having been rescued 3 days ago, and she wants to meet you. She can't see you without your permission, but does have the right to see her children. We thought you should know first," Frank explained. Gwen's story started with our trip to the Cayman Islands. I'd upset her by needing to finish a report, which meant I'd be busy for the first 2 days of our trip. We argued the night before leaving, and Gwen was cold towards me. When we got to the hotel, we made up after a night out dancing. The next day, while I worked, Gwen met a couple by the pool. The wife, Mary, asked her husband, James, to help Gwen apply sunscreen. As they talked, James became too familiar, which Gwen unexpectedly found thrilling rather than alarming. After applying the sunscreen, Mary suggested they go shopping together, and they planned to meet later. I was about to head back to our room when Harry approached, taking a break from his report. I introduced him to James and then left to change. Mary and I met at the hotel entrance as planned and took a taxi to a nice cafe for coffee and cake. During our chat, James unexpectedly joined us, ordering his own coffee. After our coffee, Mary led the way to a fancy boutique where we split up to browse. I wasn't planning to buy anything because it was out of my budget. Suddenly, Mary appeared with James, who was holding a very skimpy bikini. "Try this on, it'll look great on you," she insisted. I didn't want to seem uptight, so I took it to try on, even though it was barely there. I hesitated, but finally showed them. I was embarrassed, realizing James could almost see as much as Harry might. James complimented me, and they insisted I keep the bikini as a gift. I didn't object and thanked James with a cheek kiss. Back in the changing room, James unexpectedly came in, commenting again on the bikini and briefly touching me before leaving. I was startled but strangely thrilled. I quickly changed and left the fitting room to find Mary and James acting as if nothing unusual had happened. "We're just having fun," Mary said dismissively. We had lunch and shopped some more, and I forgot all about Harry during that time. They treated me to a revealing dress and more accessories. After a nice dinner, Mary invited Harry and me to a club, but first we planned to show off my new outfits at their apartment. Along the way, we decided to get Harry a fishing ticket as a gift. At their apartment, I tried on the new clothes with their help adjusting the fit. "You look amazing," they said. I changed again, and this time James watched me switch outfits, making me uncomfortable but also oddly flattered. "Do you like everything we got you?" James asked. "They're wonderful," I replied. "Well, there's a way you can thank me," he hinted, suggesting more gifts if I went along. I felt conflicted but rationalized his spending as his way of claiming a reward. Ashamed, I met up with Mary, who reassured me not to worry about James's behavior. Returning to the hotel, I realized Harry was upset I was late and hadn't joined him for dinner. I tried to make it up to him with the new outfit and the fishing ticket, but he was clearly still upset. He insisted we cancel the plans with James and Mary and spend the evening alone. We ended up having a good time dancing. That night, I went overboard trying to make Harry happy. The next morning, Harry had gone fishing early. Mary invited me for another outing and suggested I bring my new bikini and dress. I eagerly anticipated more lavish gifts and what I might have to do in return. I was starting to accept the role of being pampered in exchange for favors. We took James's boat out, and under Mary's encouragement, I joined her in sunbathing in our bikinis. I felt exposed and reckless. Harry called, and I explained our trip. He demanded I cut ties with James and Mary, upset with how things were unfolding. I told Harry I'd do what I wanted and see him in the evening before ending the call. When we got to our destination, Mary and I grabbed lunch and went shopping. She took me to a fancy jewelry store and bought me a necklace and bracelet set for $9,000. I knew Harry would be upset if he knew about the expensive gift, but he didn't need to know. After shopping, Mary left me alone with James, who soon became too close for comfort. James started to act inappropriately, and before I knew it, we crossed a line I regretted instantly. I knew it would be hard to face Harry after that. Despite my discomfort, Mary convinced me to go to a club with them that evening. Harry didn't want to come, so Mary said he wasn't invited. I changed into my new outfit and jewelry and went to the club with them. When I checked my phone, I saw several missed calls and messages from Harry. I defiantly took a selfie at the club and texted him that I wouldn't be home that night. At the club, we didn't have to wait in line because James knew the owner. We were led to a private table on the roof for dinner. After eating, I felt dizzy. I thought it was just the wine, but when I went to get some fresh air at the parapet, I felt hands on me that shouldn't have been there. I tried to steady myself, thinking my drink might have been tampered with. From the corner of my eye, I saw Harry trying to get into the club and being thrown out. Overwhelmed and confused, I realized too late that I was in a bad situation. When I tried to gather myself, I was misled back to the table, and things spiraled out of control. The next thing I remember, I was on James's boat, heading out for what they called island hopping for a week or more. I felt trapped and manipulated. Mary showed me a compromising video and blackmailed me into staying with them. She even made me text Harry that I'd be gone for a week. Over the next 2 weeks, I was treated terribly. I felt like nothing more than an object to them, used at their whim. They even drugged my drinks to make me comply. One day, a seaplane landed nearby, and a man named Raphael came aboard. James sold me to him for $200,000, claiming I'd earn back that amount quickly. Raphael was harsh and demanding, making it clear I was now his property. I was forced into a situation I never imagined, feeling more like a prisoner than a person. I told Harry I'd see him in the evening and hung up. After we arrived at our destination, Mary and I went for lunch and then shopping. She took me to an upscale jewelry store and bought me a necklace and bracelet set worth $9,000. I knew such a pricey gift might upset Harry, but what he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. After shopping, Mary had to step out, leaving me alone with James. Our interaction quickly became inappropriate. This led to a regrettable decision that would make it difficult for me to face Harry later. Despite my discomfort, Mary persuaded me to go to a club that evening. When I mentioned Harry wouldn't be joining, she boldly stated he wasn't invited. I reluctantly agreed and changed into my new outfit. At the club, after checking my phone, I saw several missed calls from Harry. Angrily, I sent him a defiant selfie from the club, telling him not to wait up. We skipped the line at the club thanks to James being a regular and went straight to a private area. After dinner, I felt dizzy and went to get some fresh air. I suspected my drink had been spiked when I felt hands on me and lost my balance. I saw Harry trying to get into the club and making a scene. I ignored him and continued with the night. Later, I realized the gravity of my situation as we left the club. The next thing I knew, I was on a plane with Mary and James heading to a remote location. We landed at a private airfield, drove to a marina, and then sailed to a small island with tight security. The place looked like a small hotel, but felt more like a prison with guards everywhere. We were taken to a room where a woman named Rhonda introduced herself and told me my new name would be Celeste. She instructed me to forget my past and adapt to my new life, mentioning that my room had no lock, signaling I had no freedom. Rhonda explained the harsh rules of the place. I couldn't speak to men unless spoken to, and I had to obey and please the clients or face severe punishment. The threat of punishment ranged from minor to extremely severe, like being thrown off a cliff. I quickly learned that my purpose here was to entertain and satisfy clients, some of whom might be rough or have unusual demands. The place was corrupt, and I was to act accordingly. Over the next month, I was trained in various skills for the parties we hosted, which included wealthy and often dangerous guests. We entertained them, and after the parties, the night continued with more personal encounters. I found out that Mary and James were not the only ones tricking women into this lifestyle. Several other women shared similar stories of being deceived during vacations. I had been trapped in this life of degradation for almost 5 years. One of the guests, a particularly cruel man named Sanchez, had taken a liking to me. The last time I was with him, I ended up injured and needed medical treatment. Now, I learned that he wanted to buy me for $200,000 and take me away. I considered escaping by jumping from the balcony, but couldn't bring myself to do it. I confided in a friend about what was going to happen to me, and she burst into tears. She told me that Sanchez often got rid of the girls he bought after a few months, usually selling them to a brothel in Mexico. That night, Sanchez told me I belonged to him and that I'd be kept very busy. I lay beside him until he fell asleep. Then I moved as far away as I could and cried. I wondered why I had thrown away my perfect life for greed. I longed to return to my loving husband and children. As I lay there, I suddenly heard gunshots and commotion outside. Sanchez jumped up to grab his gun, but before he could, 2 figures in black burst into the room. They quickly subdued him and signaled that the area was secure. They then restrained me and told me to stay put. Scared, I waited until a man came in to check on me. I quickly explained who I was, and he left. Later, a uniformed woman freed me and told me to get dressed. Downstairs, I saw Rhonda with other women and couldn't hold back. I punched her. Our rescuers separated us and confirmed Rhonda wasn't a victim but one of the attackers. After confirming her identity, she was taken away. I was later flown to the US for debriefing by the FBI. That's where I am now. I found out my ex-husband has remarried and his new wife is raising my children. I've requested to see them and am waiting for a response. This brings me to my meeting with Special Agent Frank Grimes, who shared Gwen's story with me. While I felt a bit sorry for her, ultimately her choices led to her downfall. Frank and I agreed that meeting her might help close this chapter, although I wasn't sure it would change anything about seeing my children. In an empty office, Gwen was clearly nervous when we met. She tried to engage by complimenting my new hairstyle and asking about the past 5 years. I responded coolly, acknowledging her hardships but reminding her that her actions had led to her current situation. Gwen expressed regret and asked if we could be friends for the sake of the children. I told her we'd need to take it slow and consider the children's feelings, especially since they now had a new sibling. Gwen was surprised to learn I had moved to a bigger house and that she had some savings thanks to her father managing some funds for her. She expressed a desire to make amends, but I remained skeptical of her intentions. Our conversation ended tensely. Gwen accused me of overreacting to her mistake, but I confronted her with the harsh truth about her actions, which included abandoning our family for strangers. I couldn't hide my disgust and left her in tears. After the meeting, I left work early, a rarity for me, and called Amanda to say I'd be home soon. She sensed something was wrong, but I reassured her that we'd talk when I got home. After the children went to bed, Amanda and I had a long talk. I shared everything with her. She thought for a moment and then said, "You need to speak with Ted and Amy about arranging a meeting with the kids. I know you're worried she'll be a bad influence, but from what you've said, she's been through a lot these past 5 years and needs counseling just like you. Now go talk to Ted and Amy and tell them everything." So I called Ted and headed over to their place. When I arrived, Ted and Amy were very welcoming. I reassured them that everything was fine with us before we sat down in the kitchen with some coffee Amy had made. I took a deep breath and said, "I have some news about Gwen." They looked worried right away, and Amy was visibly nervous. I explained everything from the start, not leaving anything out. By the time I finished, Amy was crying and Ted looked like he might cry too. After calming down a bit, I remembered Amanda's advice about Gwen's situation. "I know this is shocking news, but Gwen is still your daughter. You probably still have feelings for her. She doesn't have anywhere to live right now, so maybe she could stay here while she gets counseling. It might also be a good place for her to reconnect with her kids." To my surprise, Ted responded first. "Harry, you're such a kind person, always thinking of others. It's a mystery why Gwen did what she did to you, but we still love her and would like to help her recover. This could be a good place for her to meet her kids again. When do you think this should happen?" Ted asked. I told them I didn't want to get too involved and gave them Frank's number to arrange things directly. "If you need anything from me to make this go smoothly, just let me know," I said as I left. When I got home, Amanda was waiting. I told her what we had decided, and she hugged me, saying I did the right thing. The next day at work, I felt more productive, beginning to heal our family's wounds. I let Frank know that Ted would call him. Frank appreciated it and updated me that Gwen had been sedated after our meeting due to her distress, but was now much better and hopeful about reconnecting with her family. Frank later called to say the meeting with Gwen's parents went well, with many tears and apologies. Gwen wanted to meet her kids after a few more counseling sessions. A month later, the counselors agreed it was time for Gwen to meet the children. Amanda and I were nervous. We decided Amanda should join the kids at the meeting as they saw her as a mother figure. On the meeting day, we all drove in Amanda's minivan. The kids were quiet and the mood was tense. We left the younger kids with a neighbor and headed to Ted and Amy's. When we arrived, Sarah started crying, wanting to go home. Amanda comforted her while Ted led us inside. Inside, the children ran to Amy for hugs. Amy tearfully introduced Gwen as their mother, who missed them a lot. "Go say hi," Amy encouraged. The kids hesitated, hiding behind Amanda. She reassured them, "Remember what we talked about? It's okay, she won't bite." She led them to Gwen, letting go of their hands to show they could approach her. Gwen thanked Amanda and smiled. William, a bit bolder, greeted Gwen. "Hi, I knew who you were when we walked in. Your picture is at our house. You looked younger there." The day was full of emotions, a first step in mending broken ties. After putting the kids to bed, Amanda and I sat down and I told her everything. She paused thoughtfully and then suggested, "You should talk to Ted and Amy about how to approach a meeting with the kids. I understand your concerns about her influence, but she's had a tough 5 years and needs support." I reluctantly agreed and drove over to Ted and Amy's house. They welcomed me warmly, and we sat in the kitchen where Amy served coffee. I explained the whole situation about Gwen, not leaving out any details. By the end of my story, Amy was in tears and Ted looked deeply moved. "I know this is shocking, but Gwen is still your daughter," I continued, "and she needs a place to stay while she stabilizes. Maybe she could stay here and start reconnecting with the kids." Ted replied warmly, "Harry, you're a good man for considering this. We still care for Gwen and would like to help her recover. It would be good for her to be here with the kids." I left them Frank's contact details to arrange the specifics and returned home to Amanda. I shared the outcomes with her, and she reassured me that I had done the right thing. The next day felt more productive at work, having started to mend some family wounds. Frank later informed me that Gwen was responding well to the possibility of reuniting with her family. After some planning, the day to meet Gwen arrived. We prepared the kids, explaining that their mom had made some big mistakes but still loved them and wanted to see them. They were hesitant but accepted the idea on Amanda's encouragement. At Ted and Amy's, the children were initially reluctant. Sarah even started crying, wanting to go home. Amanda comforted her, and Ted led us inside. The kids ran to Amy for hugs when we entered. Amy then introduced Gwen, who was emotional. "Kids, this is your mom. She missed you a lot while she was away." The children were nervous, staying close to Amanda. She encouraged them gently. "It's okay. Go say hello. She's missed you." Reluctantly, they approached Gwen. William was the first to speak, recognizing her from photos at home, but noting she looked older. The visit was emotional but ended positively. Back home, Amanda and I discussed the day. I admitted that Gwen seemed genuinely regretful and still had love for us. Despite my doubts, Amanda believed Gwen deserved a chance to make amends. The next day, Frank called to arrange for me to pick Gwen up for a follow-up meeting. At the office, Gwen signed some official documents, and the director explained the successful operation that had disrupted a criminal network thanks to a joint task force effort. Gwen and I were then given a symbolic chance to close our past wounds by triggering a remote destruction of a vessel involved in the criminal activities, which Gwen handled. Afterwards, I took Gwen out to lunch, our first time alone in 5 years. It was awkward, but we tried to discuss the future. Gwen expressed a hope that we could all be friends, which I wasn't sure about but agreed to consider. I joked with Amanda later about making sure her boyfriend was gone before I got home, which she found amusing. Gwen didn't appreciate the humor, revealing the tension she still felt. I dropped Gwen off and spent the rest of the day with the kids. Amanda and I talked that evening about how freeing the day had been, feeling like we'd finally moved past a painful chapter. A few weeks later, Amanda suggested inviting Gwen and her parents over for Sunday dinner, showing that we were slowly but surely moving forward. Jason and Wendy hadn't seen their grandparents for a while, and it was time for them to meet Gwen. Although hesitant, I agreed to the meeting. The day turned out well. All 4 kids got along with Gwen. William even called her Mom a couple of times, which made the room go quiet. Gwen looked unsure, but Amanda smiled and gave her a thumbs up, reassuring her. Sarah was a bit reserved. When Amanda asked her about it, Sarah asked, "If I start calling her Mom and she leaves again, what will happen?" Sarah had tears in her eyes. Amanda comforted her by saying it had been a long time and Gwen had changed and wouldn't leave again. Amanda then did what she does best. She walked up to Gwen, gave her a big hug, and welcomed her to the family. Everyone was moved. Gwen's parents were comfortable financially, but Gwen felt the need to work. Her qualifications were out of date, so she enrolled in a local college for a 2-year real estate agent course. Since Amanda and I were doing well, we bought Gwen a used Toyota Corolla for her birthday from all the children. It was an emotional moment for everyone. Our family grew closer every week. Gwen became a regular guest at our house, often staying for dinner or even overnight. She became an accepted part of the family, occasionally babysitting the kids when we needed. It's been 10 years since Gwen rejoined our lives. Sadly, her parents passed away 2 years ago, within a month of each other, one from cancer, the other from grief. Gwen now owns her parents' house and with the inheritance is financially stable. She works at a real estate agency and spends most of her free time with us. She and Amanda have become best friends, enjoying spa weekends and theater trips together while I look after the kids. As far as I know, Gwen doesn't date anymore. Amanda thinks it's because of her past experiences. I believe what happened has made her a better person, and I've come to forgive her. Amanda says this has made me a better person too. Only time will tell how things will turn out in the end. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.